Have you ever wondered why two people, same age, same diet, same lifestyle, can age so differently? One person at 70 is sharp, engaged, and mentally agile. Another at the same age is struggling with memory, focus, and cognitive clarity that has been declining for a decade. Same chronological age, dramatically different biological outcomes. For most of medical history, this variation was attributed to luck, to mysterious, individual differences that science couldn't explain or predict. That explanation is no longer adequate. We now know with increasing precision that a significant proportion of the variation in how people age cognitively after 50 is driven by genetics. Not destiny, not random luck. Specific, identifiable, testable variations in the DNA that you were born with. They change how your brain responds to aging, how efficiently you process nutrients, and how aggressively amyloid accumulates, and how robustly your brain responds to the interventions we've been discussing throughout this series. Two variants above all others have generated the most research attention and clinical relevance for cognitive aging after 50. The first is APOE4, a variant of the apolipoprotein E gene that is present in approximately 25% of the population. It increases Alzheimer's risk by 3 to 4 times for one copy and by 8 to 12 times for two copies. The second is MTHFR, variants of the methylation tetrahydrofolate reductase gene that affect up to 40% of adults. It silently impairs the methylation pathway, controlling BDNF expression, homocysteine metabolism, and inflammatory regulation. Most people have no idea whether they carry either variant. Most doctors don't routinely test for them, and most health protocols don't account for the dramatically different requirements that carriers of these variants have. Today, we change that. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what APOE4 and MTHFR do. You'll learn how to find your status easily, and the modifications that research shows can reduce their impact. This is the most personalized video we have produced, because your biology is not generic and neither should your protocol be. Let's start with APOE4, because it is the most significant known genetic risk factor for late-onset Alzheimer's disease. It is the one whose mechanisms are most directly relevant to the protocols we've built. APOE, apolipoprotein E, is a protein that plays a central role in lipid metabolism throughout the body. But in the brain, it has a specific and critical additional function. It is the primary transporter of cholesterol in the central nervous system. And cholesterol, despite its reputation, is not simply a cardiovascular risk factor in the brain. It is an essential structural component of neuronal membranes and myelin sheaths, and it is a direct precursor for neurosteroids. The APOE gene has 3 common variants: E2, E3, and E4. APOE3 is the most common, present in approximately 60% of the population. APOE4 differs from APOE3 at 2 amino acid positions, and these small differences produce profoundly different biological consequences. The first consequence involves amyloid clearance. APOE proteins play a direct role in facilitating the clearance of amyloid beta from the brain. APOE4 performs this clearance function significantly less efficiently than APOE3. It has lower binding affinity for amyloid beta. The result is that APOE4 carriers accumulate amyloid beta in brain tissue faster and begin accumulating it at a younger age. It's not simply that APOE4 increases inflammation. It specifically impairs the primary protein responsible for clearing the toxic amyloid. The second consequence involves cholesterol metabolism in neurons. APOE4 is less efficient at recycling cholesterol during periods of neuronal stress. APOE4 carriers have less efficient cholesterol supply to neurons under stress, impairing the repair response and making neurons more vulnerable. The third consequence involves mitochondrial function. Research found APOE4 produced significantly worse mitochondrial function in neurons, with lower ATP production, higher reactive oxygen species generation, and more rapid mitochondrial deterioration with age. The mitochondrial protocols from our previous videos are therefore particularly important for APOE4 carriers. The fourth consequence involves neuroinflammation. APOE4 amplifies the microglial inflammatory response to amyloid and other brain stressors. The neuroinflammation we've addressed is a more serious and rapidly escalating problem for APOE4 carriers, requiring more aggressive anti-inflammatory intervention. Now here is something critically important. Carrying APOE4 is not a death sentence. It is not a guaranteed Alzheimer's diagnosis. The majority of APOE4 carriers, even those who carry 2 copies, do not develop Alzheimer's disease. What APOE4 does is shift the biological balance, making proactive brain health intervention more urgently important. The protocols in this series are more important for APOE4 carriers, significantly different in urgency and in the specific emphasis that matters most. MTHFR, methylation tetrahydrofolate reductase, is an enzyme that plays a central role in a biochemical process called methylation. And methylation is one of the most fundamental regulatory processes in all of biology. acting as a master switch for health. Methylation is the addition of a methyl group, a carbon atom with 3 hydrogen atoms, to a molecule, changing its function. This simple modification can activate or silence genes and regulate the synthesis and breakdown of vital neurotransmitters. It also converts potentially toxic homocysteine into the beneficial methionine while regulating the expression of BDNF, our brain growth factor. MTHFR produces the active form of folate, methylfolate, which drives the entire methylation cycle like a biological engine. When MTHFR function is impaired, the cycle slows. Active methylfolate production falls, and homocysteine accumulates in the blood and brain. The consequences for BDNF expression, neuroinflammation, and brain vascular health are significant and far-reaching. The 2 most common MTHFR variants are C6-cetanamide T and A12-nosminoate-C, which impact enzyme activity to varying degrees. The C677T variant can reduce enzyme activity by up to 70%, while A12-98C causes more modest reductions of 20 to 40%. The first cognitive pathway involves elevated homocysteine, which is directly neurotoxic and damages brain blood vessels. This leads to accelerated brain atrophy and cognitive decline, but B vitamin supplementation has been shown to reduce these rates. The second pathway is impaired BDNF regulation. MTHFR variants can dysregulate the methylation patterns that control BDNF production. Finally, methylation provides SAM, the universal donor required for synthesizing serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. When SAM production falls, the resulting deficits in mood and motivation reflect the critical link between genetics and cognitive drive. Before we discuss protocol modifications, let's talk about how to actually find out whether you carry APOE4, MTHFR variants, or other relevant genetic variants, because the information is only useful if you have it. The most accessible and most affordable route is direct-to-consumer genetic testing. Services like 23andMe, which test approximately 700,000 genetic variants across the genome, will identify your APOE status and can identify MTHFR variants with appropriate raw data analysis. However, there is an important nuance with 23andMe and APOE specifically. 23andMe previously reported APOE status directly, but has changed its reporting approach under FDA guidance. Currently, 23andMe's standard health reports may not directly report your APOE4 status, but the raw genetic data that 23andMe provides, which you can download, does contain the relevant APOE variants. Third-party analysis services, including Prometheus and several others, can analyze your raw data and report your APOE4 and MTHFR status directly. Cost of 23andMe, approximately $99 to $199. Cost of Prometheus analysis, approximately $12. For more comprehensive genetic health reporting, that includes APOE4 directly, services like Ancestry DNA combined with a health interpretation service or dedicated health genetic testing companies provide clearer reporting. Several direct-to-consumer health genetic tests specifically marketed for Alzheimer's risk assessment now include APOE4 reporting directly. The most comprehensive option, and the one I would recommend for anyone with a family history, is testing through a physician. A standard clinical genetic test for APOE status, ordered by a physician, typically costs $100 to $300 with insurance coverage varying. This has the advantage of professional interpretation and the option for genetic counseling if the results are concerning. For MTHFR specifically, this is routinely tested through standard laboratory panels ordered by physicians, typically under $50 with insurance. Many functional medicine physicians routinely include MTHFR testing in comprehensive health panels. It can also be identified through consumer genetic testing, raw data analysis. My recommendation, order a direct-to-consumer genetic test if you haven't already. Download your raw data, run it through Prometheus or an equivalent service, know your APOE4 and MTHFR status. This single investment of $100 to $200 will tell you more about the specific biological vulnerabilities you need to address than almost any other single health investment you can make. Now, let's talk about the specific protocol modifications that the research supports for APOE4 and MTHFR carriers. Protocol modifications for APOE4 carriers. Modification 1. Dramatically prioritize omega-3 fatty acids. APOE4 impairs the brain's ability to efficiently utilize dietary omega-3 fatty acids. Research has shown that APOE4 carriers have lower brain DHA concentrations than non-carriers, even when dietary omega-3 intake is equivalent. This means APOE4 carriers need significantly higher omega-3 intake to achieve the same brain DHA levels that non-carriers achieve at lower doses. Research published in JAMA Neurology found that higher omega-3 intake was associated with reduced amyloid accumulation, specifically in APOE4 carriers, all suggesting that omega-3 supplementation may partially compensate for APOE4's impaired amyloid clearance mechanism. The research-supported dose for APOE4 carriers, 3 to 4 grams of combined EPA and DHA per day, higher than the non-carrier recommendation. Modification 2, aggressive cholesterol optimization specifically for brain cholesterol metabolism. APOE4's impaired transport makes this particularly important. Research has shown that APOE4 carriers benefit significantly from dietary patterns that support brain cholesterol synthesis, specifically adequate intake of saturated fats. This means working with a physician to optimize the balance between cardiovascular cholesterol reduction and neuronal cholesterol availability. The Mediterranean diet has the strongest research support for APOE4 protection. Olive oil specifically enhances amyloid clearance through the blood-brain barrier. Modification 3, maximum prioritization of sleep quality. The glymphatic pathway becomes the most important compensatory route for amyloid removal. Inadequate slow-wave sleep represents the greatest single lifestyle risk for amyloid accumulation. Treat sleep as the non-negotiable foundation. Modification 4, aggressive neuroinflammation management. APOE4 amplifies the microglial inflammatory response, requiring more aggressive intervention. Prioritize the complete anti-inflammatory stack. Omega-3 at higher doses, resveratrol at the upper end, and quercetin at 1,000 milligrams daily. Modification 5, ketone availability. Research found APOE4 is associated with impaired neuronal glucose metabolism starting decades before cognitive decline. Ketones can partially bypass the insulin-dependent glucose mechanism. MCT oil supplementation provides meaningful cognitive fuel support for APOE4 impaired metabolism. Protocol modifications for MTHFR carriers. Modification 1, switch to methylfolate immediately to bypass the impaired MTHFR enzyme step. Standard folic acid may fail to correct deficiency and actually worsen it by competing with limited methylfolate. Methylfolate is immediately available. Modification 2, add methylcobalamin B12. The methylation cycle requires both methylfolate and methylcobalamin, the active form of B12, to function. Modification 3, homocysteine monitoring. For MTHFR carriers, a fasting plasma homocysteine test should be a regular part of health monitoring. Optimal homocysteine is below 7 to 8. Many adults are walking around with levels of 12 to 20, silently damaging brain vessels. Modification 4, NAC at higher doses. NAC supports the transsulfuration pathway, reducing the demand and supporting master antioxidant production. 23 videos. And with genetics and nutrigenomics, we have added the final dimension to the system we've built. Because here is what nutrigenomics, the study of how genetic variants affect nutritional requirements and health interventions, ultimately teaches us. The mechanisms we've discussed across 23 videos are universal. Every human brain after 50 benefits from BDNF support, synaptic magnesium, and liver detoxification. Mitochondrial energy, deep sleep, gut health, anti-inflammatory intervention, arterial flexibility, social connection, NAD plus restoration, autophagy activation, senolytic therapy, and telomere protection. These are not individual choices from a menu. They are biological necessities that apply to every aging brain. But the urgency and the emphasis are determined by your individual biology, by your APOE status, by your MTHFR variants. APOE4 carriers need to be most aggressive about omega-3 supplementation, sleep optimization, and anti-inflammatory intervention. MTHFR carriers need to be most aggressive about methylated B vitamin supplementation, homocysteine monitoring, and null-C. Genetics determines your starting position. Your choices determine your trajectory. Your genes are not your destiny. Studies of APOE4 carriers who lived into their 90s with intact cognitive function consistently find the same pattern, decades of healthy lifestyle practices. High omega-3 intake, Mediterranean dietary pattern, consistent physical activity, excellent sleep, active social engagement, low chronic stress. Your biology is responsive. It responds to what you eat, what you take, how you sleep, how you move, and how you connect. If you have not already done genetic testing, order a direct-to-consumer test. Know your APOE4 and MTHFR status. Coming up next week, the specific role of the circadian clock in cognitive aging, the molecular clocks that operate in every cell. Subscribe now, turn on notifications. Thank you for 23 videos. Stay sharp, stay personalized, stay vital.